Welcome to a very special edition of Lessons in Leadership. I'm Steve Adubato with my co-anchor and executive producer, Mary Gambler. Mary, we're about to meet an icon in the world of leadership, literature, teaching, coaching. Ken Blanchard. You know, by the way, for those who don't know, Ken Blanchard, 1 Minute Manager, written with Dr. Spencer Johnson, who wrote Mary.
Who Moved My Cheese.
Who Moved My
and
Cheese.
I think he also wrote did he write Peaks and Valleys as well?
I'm impressed.
Thank you.
That's why she's executive producer. How about this one, The Heart of a Leader, Ken Blanchard, right? And then this one, Empowerment Takes More Than a Minute. These are just some of the many Ken Blanchard books. We got the honor of talking to Ken Blanchard. Mary, 82 years young. What's up with that?
He is just, if there is an example of age is just a number, it is him. He is inspirational. He's sharp as ever. And he just gets it. Do you ever meet that person that just gets it? And I know that's not really a technical or psychological term, but you just want to sit and have a cup of coffee with him and talk for hours. And I was just very grateful that you had that opportunity to interview him and that we get the chance to share it with everyone, because just how he talks about his leadership, how he became the leader that he is today, how he really just found a passion for communication and leadership and self-help and just being present. He's just a really great guy.
And you'll see in this clip, by the way, we'll talk about our sponsors and some other things about lessons in leadership in a second. But in the first clip you're about to see, he talks about running for president in the 7th grade in school. And his dad told him, that's not leadership, running for the presidency of your class. Your leadership responsibilities start now that you're president. So interesting. You think at 7th grade, big deal. Well, too many people in public life think running for office is leadership. Leadership is once you get there, what you do or don't do. By the way, Mary, speaking of that, let's talk about the folks who are very generous and make lessons in leadership possible.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much to our sponsors. We have Valley Bank, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, Prager Metis, the New Jersey Sharing Network, and Seton Hall University and the Buccino Leadership Institute. And also, too, it's a great opportunity to thank our promotional partners, CIANJ and Commerce Magazine, and NJBIA and New Jersey Business Magazine as well.
And also the folks at News 12 Plus and all the other platforms where we're seeing, our newest being iHeartRadio and Audible, right?
That is correct. Yeah, super excited about that. And you can also find our podcast on Google Play and on Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts.
Lots of other places. So listen, when you do this kind of work, when you've been teaching, writing, coaching, thinking about leadership and communication for as long as I have, which is a lot longer than Mary because I'm older, the chance to actually, as Mary said, to sit down and talk with someone like Ken Blanchard, who's a giant in this industry. And I've got a leadership library right across the hall filled with all kinds of fascinating books. But Blanchard's really stand out. And the fact that we got to talk to him was humbling. And so there are 2 different clips you're going to see. The first one, well, there's no way to separate them. It's just Ken Blanchard, really good in the first one and even better in the second one. Steve Adubato, Mary Gambler, Ken Blanchard. We are honored to be joined by a giant in the world of leadership and management, and as a student of leadership, which we all are. This gentleman, Ken Blanchard, has made a big difference. He's the co-founder and chief spiritual officer of the Ken Blanchard Company. He's the author of this extraordinary book, The 1 Minute Manager. I don't want to kiss up to you too much, Ken Blanchard, but you know, as someone who's done leadership development and coaching over the years, you are the giant in our business. You know that, right?
Well, I appreciate that. I've been very blessed to got a chance to work with a lot of wonderful people, that's for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. Your interest, bordering on a healthy obsession around leadership, comes from what?
Well, it really comes from my father, who ended up retiring as an admiral in the Navy. And I never forget, I won the president of the 7th grade in New Rochelle, New York. And I came home and I was all pumped up. And my father said, well, Ken, your leadership training begins today. Now that you're president, don't ever use your position, because great leaders are great because people trust and respect them, not because they have power. And he said, you might think that's surprising coming from a military officer, but if I acted like a big deal and I was more important than my men, they would have shot me before the enemy.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Ken, let me ask you this. So many leaders that I've worked with over the years, and you've worked with many, many more than that. Why do so many leaders have such a difficult time simply saying, I own it, I was wrong, my mistake, I'm responsible, here's what we need to do, in spite of all the advice that you and others who are really smart about leadership have given them?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Steve, that we found is the human ego, which is, two ways that shows up. One is false pride, when people act like they have a more than philosophy. I'm brighter than, I'm smarter than, and you ought to listen to me. And a lot of people don't know that this is an ego problem, which is fear of self-doubt, when they really think that they don't know everything and they have a less than philosophy. It's interesting. The guy that wrote "I'm okay, you're okay" years ago said the worst life position was "I'm okay, you're not." And all the research shows that people that act like that are really covering up not okay feelings about themselves. And so I think leaders that I've run into, which have high control needs, are afraid that people will realize they don't know everything, but they don't understand. I wrote a book with Colleen Barrett, the president of Southwest Airlines, when Turb sat down, and she said to me, she said, Ken, people admire your skills, but they love your vulnerability. When you really know that you don't know all the answers, they get excited, because now we can really be a team. We rather than me is the important ingredient. But I tell you, a lot of people, because of their ego, don't get it.
So well said, Ken. And the follow-up to that is this. A definition from your perspective of quote unquote servant leadership. Servant leadership is?
Well, it's when you really think that you're there to serve rather than be served. That's the most important thing. And, Steve, when I talk about servant leadership, a lot of times people think they're talking about the inmates running the prison or trying to please everybody. But there's two parts of servant leadership. One is vision, direction, values, and goals, and that's really the responsibility of the hierarchy. It doesn't mean you don't involve people, but if people don't know what business you're in, what you're trying to accomplish, and the values to drive, shame on you. But once that leadership part of servant leadership is taken care of, now you traditionally, turn the pyramid upside down and you work for your people, so that eventually everybody works for the people who take care of the customers. And so that's why a company like Nordstrom's, you go a problem, the people say, no problem, I'll take care of it. They don't say, let me talk to my supervisor in there. And so that they can really do that in the same way at Southwest, they can actually make decisions.
As you're talking about servant leadership, there's another aspect of leadership that I struggle with, because in my other life, in doing leadership and conducting leadership seminars, one of my students said, why don't you talk more about morals and ethics in leadership as a leadership trait?
Yes.
And the answer is, I'm not really sure how to do it. So you understand ethical leadership better than most. Define it and help people understand why it's so incredibly important now more than ever.
Well, it's interesting. I wrote a book called The Power of Ethical Management. Integrity Pays. You don't have to cheat to win, with Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. He was 86 years old at the time. But we said that there's three questions you need to ask around ethical. The first one, is it legal? In other words, is it really? The second one, is it fair to all involved? Because sometimes something is legal, but it's not really fair. And the third one's a powerful one, is would you like it discussed in the newspaper? How will it make you feel about yourself if you do that? And if you do that ethics check, we call it, it's a pretty powerful one to say, well, is this legal? Well, it is legal, but, is it really going to be fair? And how will it make me feel about myself? And so people just need to think through decisions to make sure that they are ethical, and they just don't make a decision right away for expedient reasons.
Ken, I think a lot about the concept of feedback, giving constructive, often hard to hear, but important feedback to people. And again, you've been doing it for years. Some advice for people who are giving feedback to other people about their performance. Maybe they're on the team. They want to be constructive, they want to be positive, but they also have to be candid about someone not getting the job done. They don't want to hurt their feelings, etc. Is there a balance that you have found in all that?
Well, it is. And you mentioned the 1 minute manager, because the first secret is 1 minute goal setting. All good performance starts with clear goals. But then the last two secrets, 1 minute praising, and we changed it for the new 1 minute manager to 1 minute redirects. That's really about feedback. And one of the key things as a manager, as a parent and all, is you got to be observant of what's going on. And so if people are doing things well and things are progressing, you need to get out there and say, I really noticed that things are going really well. And I want to tell you, it's just fabulous. And I hope you feel good about it. How are you feeling? And you praise them. And if their performance isn't doing as well, now you're in for a 1 minute redirect, but you don't charge in and say, you idiot, how could you be so stupid? You say, I noticed that the performance in this area is not quite as good as we had hoped. Do you agree? And if you put it like that, they're going to say, yeah, I know. Is there any way I can help you get back on focus and all? And so remember that feedback is the breakfast of champions, a colleague of mine, Rick Tate, said, but you want to make sure that you have a relationship with the person and all. You're not just coming off the wall. One of the biggest questions we get, Steve, is how do you give feedback up the hierarchy, And because
Wow.
that's really important. But I'll never forget, I was teaching in a business school.
By the way, do me a favor, Ken, could you stay right there? I'm going to end this segment, but if you don't mind, I'm going to keep the conversation going with you for a couple minutes. You okay with that?
Sure.
That's Ken Blanchard. He is an icon in the world of leadership and management. And for people like me, and there are many who are always working on our leadership skills and making mistakes every day, you learn a lot from this guy. That's it for this segment with Ken Blanchard. But truth is, we're going to keep the cameras rolling. I'm Steve Adubato. Stay with us. We'll be right back. This edition of Lessons in Leadership with me, Steve Adubato, and my colleague Mary Gamba is brought to you by Valley Bank, the Buccino Leadership Institute at Seton Hall University, New Jersey Sharing Network, Prager Metis, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, and Seton Hall University, showing the world what great minds can do since 1856.
This is Mary Gamba. If you want more leadership tips and tools, log on to stand-deliver.com. That's stand-deliver.com.
Promotional support for this edition of Lessons in Leadership with me, Steve Adubato, and my colleague, Mary Gamba, has been provided by NJ.com, NJBIA, and New Jersey Business Magazine, CIANJ, and Commerce Magazine. So that's Ken Blanchard. And Mary, there's so many ways we could respond to this before we go into the second interview that we did with Ken Blanchard. But the one thing that really struck me of the many things you talked about was servant leadership. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, and that is one of my favorite things. Really, that's just a term that's come to light for me personally over the past few years doing Lessons in Leadership with you. A lot of people talk about servant leadership, and it's really about giving to others and not being self-centered, thinking about others, being selfless, and really just getting people to follow you by giving and not expecting things back in return.
Okay, stay with that though. Okay, so you're building your brand. Mary and I wrote another book a few years back called You Are the Brand. So hopefully this is not a contradiction, but I want you to take it on. You spend your time, and I have obviously, trying to build a brand, build a business, build it around your persona and the great team that we have behind us. So if you're building a brand, it's about you, right? And it's about the value you bring. It's, you put your face on the cover of a book, blah, blah, blah. You get all that, right? So is that not servant leadership because you're building your brand and, hey, look, it's a Steve Adubato brand. It's not just about me. It's anyone who does this or anything else where they're out front. Does that mean it's not servant leadership if you're out front?
Absolutely not. Just the opposite. The most important thing to do once you've arrived, if you will, if you are Steve Adubato, if you're Anthony Robbins, if you're an actor, if you're a singer, once you get to that point, it's all about thanking and recognizing the people as you do all the time. You're constantly thanking our great team with Elvin and Sylvester and Amy on the back end and Scarlett and Frank, and we can't thank them enough. And as long as you continue to do that, to me, that's what servant leadership means. So you're leading by example, you're leading by your actions, but just because you're the one out front doesn't make you any less of a servant leader. It just is the most important thing is that you're thanking and recognizing those people behind the scenes that aren't on the cover of that book.
Another real quickie before we go to the second clip. By the way, let's remind everyone that Ken Blanchard, by the time this is seen, will be 82 years of age. So the bad thing for Mary, you know what I'm gonna say, right?
I don't think I do.
When I found out how old he was, I was like, well, I was gonna think about stepping back at some. Mary, I've got a fair amount of time.
That's a lot of time. I don't know. You know me. I've got my 3-year
couple
plan. I'm getting an
decades, you're
RV. I don't know if my entire studio is going to fit in my RV plan. So
Wait, hold on. This has nothing to do with Ken Blanchard, but are you willing to say what your plan is?
oh, sure. No,
Go ahead.
it's because I'm a firm believer. If you say it, it's going to happen. If you tell enough people, and as crazy as it seems, but I have a 16 and a 19-year-old. When the 16-year-old goes off to college, we're going to sell the house. We're going to buy an RV. We want to go cross country around the country and then figure out where we're going to plant our roots, most likely in like North Carolina or South Carolina. But prior to that, take a year to just, check out the great country that we live in. And doing it all in an RV. So Frank, Scarlin, and Elvin, you're going to have to get my studio set up in a much smaller space.
But you're not leaving me, are you?
No. Well, because I said it before, because of COVID, that is the one good thing that has come out of COVID. You can
Yeah.
work remote. So we'll just have to make sure that the RV is parked somewhere on work days that has Wi-Fi.
You know what? You're always thinking and innovating. And by the way, of all the terrible, horrific things that have happened, and the people who have suffered and their families and lives lost, that is one sliver of positivity, if you will. Hey, so this is the second clip of Ken Blanchard, the author of 1 Minute Manager and all these other great books. Mary and I had the honor of speaking with him. And listen, he speaks for himself in a way that's moving and emotional and powerful. And it was an honor for us. It'll be an honor for you as well, Ken Blanchard. So we had Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager, Ken Blanchard, on our sister program. We decided to keep the conversation going because there's so much to talk about. Ken, I cut you off when we were talking about feedback. I often say that, that feedback is hard to hear, but if you don't give feedback that's constructive and hard to hear and specific, then you're not actually showing that you care about people and helping them get better. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely, yeah. If you want people to win, feedback is just so key in terms of when they're doing it well, giving them a praising and add a boy, add a girl. And when it's not going well, tell them that you notice this. Did they notice the same thing? How can you help them? Because you're working for them. You're part of them. Your job is to help them win. And when I was a college professor, Steve, I was in trouble a lot because I gave the final exam always the first day of class. And the faculty would say, "What are you doing?" I'd say, "I'm confused." You say, "You acted." I said, "I thought I was supposed to teach these kids." "You are, but don't give them the questions in the final." And I'd say, "Not only am I going to give them the questions in the final, what do you think I'm going to do all semester? I'm going to teach them the answers. So when they get to the final, they get A." Life's about getting A's, not some new normal distribution curve. And that's one of the crazy things, Steve, you see out there where people have this performance review where they have to sort their people out into some normal distribution curve. Well, how many companies go out and hire losers? We lost some of our worst people last year. We need to hire some new losers to fill in those slots. No, you either hire winners you get from other companies, or you hire people with potential to be winners, and you want to work with them. And so it's your job is to help your people win, not to sit there and go,
And play gotcha, which never, and I've been accused of it, and rightfully so. For years, and I'm not going to get into, the fact that when I wrote a book, Lessons in Leadership, a lot of the book is about the fact that I have gotten caught up in what I call the blame game. Who did it wrong? Who screwed up? And you play that game, and I'm still working on it. Everyone loses, because by the time you figure out who screwed up, people are so demoralized, they don't want to fix anything, but you figured out who screwed up. That's my issue. That's not yours. Hey, Ken, how about this one? COVID, the biggest leadership lesson you've learned in the age of COVID, with the experience of COVID, for you, you've been doing this for a few years, biggest leadership lesson you've learned?
Well, first thing I learned is that Zoom is an amazing thing where you can really be with people. And people say, is this a problem in terms of leadership? Sure, you'd like to be face to face, but I want to tell you, as a leader, how many people are working with people and the offices right around them? They're not doing that, but with Zoom, you can spend so much more time and be in touch with your people so much better. I think that this is going to really be here. With our company in 2019, we did maybe a couple of hundred online things. Last year, we did like 6,500 online sessions, and because you can really just communicate, you can get to people, you can do better training. And I think it's going to help a lot of people. I did a session the other day with a guy from from South Africa, and a guy from Italy, and some people. It was just unbelievable. How do you get to do that? We had an all-company meeting. We had 225 people from around the world on Zoom. Where would you ever get that?
I absolutely agree. In a minute or so I have left with you, I need to ask you this because, and this isn't, again, you've been at this for a long time. And I'm not going to ask how old you are because I've already researched that and I know, and it's your business if you want to share it. But you've been at this for a long time. And I'm curious because so many people my age and close to my age talk about retirement. And for me, I'm like, but I love what I'm doing here, doing this and doing leadership development. But for you, your passion, your enthusiasm is as great as I imagine it's ever been. Can you please help us understand, Ken Blanchard, the secret to continuing to feel as passionately as you do about what you do? What is it?
Steve, I recently celebrated the 60th anniversary of my 21st birthday, but I really got excited about the whole concept of refiring, not retiring, because I was invited years ago to Zig Ziglar's 80th birthday. And
the sales guru.
I got on the phone with Zig and I said, you can retire? He said, there's no mention of it in the Bible, except for Jesus, Mary, and David. Nobody under 80 made an impact. I'm refiring, not retiring. And so Mort Shavitz from San Diego and I was over at UC San Diego, wrote a book called Refired, Make the Rest of Your Life the Best of Your Life, and take a look at your life in terms of what are you doing to refire yourself intellectually, physically, spiritually, and relationship wise. And so I'm just as excited now as I was, 40 or 50 years ago. What an exciting time to be alive. I just got a book accepted by Barrett Kohler, and with a colleague. So it's really fun.
Well, refire versus retire. You've given a lot of people an awful lot to think about. Ken, I just want to thank you. I really do want to thank you, not just for this interview, but for the impact you've had on so many for so long. And we wish you nothing but the best and continued success, and stay as passionate as you've always been. Thank you so much, Ken.
Well, thank you, Steve. It was great to be with you.
So there you have it. So many aspects of what Ken Blanchard had to say are worth following up on. But Mary, real quick, this is a good one about hiring people. Hire people who are winners and have potential to be winners. How the heck do you know?
I think it's a lot about attitude. I keep telling people that I come in contact with that are either in college or just getting out of college, sure, the things that you learn in school are really important. Your GPA is very important, but it's all about how you make people feel. It's about, does this person have really good eye contact? Do I get a good feel for them in terms of them being a really hard worker and a team player? So to me, hiring winners is asking the right questions to make sure that you know that you're hiring somebody with a great attitude, because all of those other things can be trained.
And the other thing, and I mentioned a little bit before, we were joking about age and retiring, but he uses the phrase refiring. And by the way, what's the name of his book, Mary, that I'm angry at myself I didn't get it. I think you just ordered it.
I did. Yeah, I ordered it yesterday. So
what's
Amazon
the name of the book again?
It's Refire, Don't Retire. Make the rest of your life the best of your life. Yeah.
Okay, so, and for those of you who feel like that I make too much of lessons in leadership about me or Mary and I and our team, it's just because I know we're representative of other people. But I will say this, of many of my friends who talk about one day they're going to retire, I respect whatever it is they want to do. Play golf every day. Just, I like golf, not, every day. But the refiring thing really got to me, Mary, because if we were not refiring, would there be a Lessons in Leadership?
Definitely not.
If we were not refiring, would you and I be writing a book as a follow-up to Lessons in Leadership?
Yeah, definitely not.
So does this is what I say, when I don't want to refire or not willing to refire my spirit to do something new and different, that is when you tap out and say, I'm done, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you and I agree to disagree just a little bit. I mean, I also want to make sure, to me, that when, I'm 80 years old or 85 years old, that I'm sitting back and definitely enjoying life a little bit more and not being on such a tight schedule. But that doesn't mean that I won't refire myself and find new things that I'm passionate about. But it just maybe won't be the same things.
Okay, but this is where you and I do disagree. If you were doing what you love, we had Alan Alda a while back, right? The great Alan Alda from MASH. I know he's in his 80s. He's refiring. He's doing his thing because he loves it, right? He has a communication institute in New York. But I'm going to say this to you. If one is doing what he or she loves to do, doesn't matter what it is, why should they retire?
Yeah, no, I don't think they should. I think, but sometimes for people, interests change, or maybe there's new interests that come in that take priority. So in those cases, it's just about changing and innovating. It's not necessarily retiring, but it is refiring, but maybe refiring in a different direction.
I agree. And by the way, doing the same thing the same way, I don't care who you are, there's no fun in that. 90 seconds left. Mary, final words that you want. Listen, for people who are loyal fans of Lessons in Leadership, every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. on News 12 Plus and all the other platforms, including now iHeartRadio, Audible, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, et cetera, on our website. By the way, tell everyone, Mary, on the website why it's valuable, because we're not selling anything.
Exactly. So if you go to our website, it's stand-deliver.com. There's articles there about every possible, I guarantee you, every possible leadership, communication skills, running better meetings, whatever the issue is that you're facing regarding work, you will find an article there that Steve has written, and it will help you get through that. So definitely log on to stand-deliver.com to find those.
And real quick, before I let everyone go, 30 seconds left. The other thing Ken Blanchard talked about is the need to give feedback is essential.
Yeah.
You're going to find a lot of, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
They're going to find a lot of articles in there about feedback because I'm obsessed. We're defensive. I'm defensive. I only want to hear how great I am. It doesn't work that way. So when we get feedback, it's a gift. Accept it, even if you don't like it. Right, Mary?
Agreed. It's so hard to hear, but it's so worthwhile to take it, even just the little nuggets, so you could just continue to get yourself, on track and be the best you can be.
And Elvin Badger, our director, just gave us feedback. You know what it said, Mary?
Yeah, it said it's time to say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Elvin, I listened to you. I took the feedback. We'll see you next time. This edition of Lessons in Leadership with me, Steve Adubato, and my colleague Mary Gamba is brought to you by Valley Bank, the Buccino Leadership Institute at Seton Hall University, New Jersey Sharing Network, Prager Metis, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, and Seton Hall University, showing the world what great minds can do since 1856.
This is Mary Gamba. If you want more leadership tips and tools, log on to stand-deliver.com. That's stand-deliver.com.
Promotional support for this edition of Lessons in Leadership with me, Steve Adubato, and my colleague, Mary Gamba, has been provided by NJ.com, NJBIA, and New Jersey Business Magazine, CIANJ, and Commerce Magazine.
Construction companies work at the heart of our communities. So do the operating engineers of Local 825, who build our roads and bridges and ensure the safe transmission of energy that keeps us on the move. Local 825 works with contractors as partners in quality, safety, and training. Our achievements stand as monuments to collaboration that will last for generations. This message has been brought to you by the members of Operating Engineers Local 825. Better building begins here.